Welcome back to Off Ball Takes. This is your host, the RB Laws, and this is my co-host.
Christopher Wells.
With playoffs practically underway, the hype for the NBA postseason is really upon us. We hope you join us in our journey through the entire postseason. Our coverage, our thoughts, everything, recaps. We're basically doing the entire thing. And speaking of recaps, we streamed a recap of day one of the play-in. So, if you didn't catch that, it is up on our channel under the live section. So, be sure to check out the VOD for that if you missed out. And shout out to everyone who really came through and supported. And let us let us know if you want more live content from us. That's something that we've been really talking about and discussing, weighing heavily. But we want to hear from you guys and see if you guys want some live content. But before we get started with today's content, as always, don't forget to subscribe, like, and turn on our noti bell. Helps us out a bunch. And follow us on Instagram and Twitter at the OBT Podcast.
And just, I guess another thing of note, we're planning on doing another live stream following the Warriors-Kings game Saturday, right? I believe it starts at 8:30.
Yeah.
So once that game is over, you guys can hop on over to our channel to watch our live stream again, in the live section, and we'll have it up afterwards so that way you can watch it if you missed it.
Yeah, it should be fun. But to kick today's content off, I'm gonna say this. It's a sad day here at Off Ball Takes because, most of our predictions were wrong. Chris went 2 for 2. I went 1 for 3. So the vibe is a little low here, but we're going to try and pick it up for you guys and push through this. But, to start off, we had the Atlanta Hawks versus the Miami Heat. Probably I don't know if you agree with me, but I think this was probably the ugliest game that we saw played. Maybe the Chicago-Toronto game was a little bit uglier, but... We had Atlanta at Miami. Atlanta won 116-105. And we recapped this on our live stream, so we're kind of gonna keep this short and sweet and to the point. But this was one of the uglier games. And I'd picked the Heat. Chris had picked the Heat, so
Yep.
we both missed on this one, unfortunately. And it was a rough game for the Heat, and I don't know. This is not looking good for them at all. So, what are your thoughts? Just, try to keep it short.
We talked about it on our live stream, and we just mentioned how just the performance by the Heat was just so lethargic, just awful. You look at you look at Jimmy Butler, right? He had 21 points, 9 assists, right? That doesn't look bad. But then you look at the efficiency, it was 6 for 19, right? He's a much more efficient scorer than that.
Yeah.
Even Bam Adebayo, right? Only 12 points. On 12 shots, right? So not necessarily the greatest game there.
Right.
Tyler Hero was okay. Just his, didn't shoot well from 3. Nobody on the Heat really shot well from 3. And then his defense wasn't, necessarily that great. Max Strus, awful. Kyle Lowry was pretty much like the only real bright spot for Miami, right?
Pretty
At
much.
33, which is weird because he struggled pretty much the entire season. But he did come to play, and had other guys played a little better, they would have won. But at the same time, like Atlanta, it just felt like was just better. We talked about regardless of who won, it would be a close game. It wasn't really that close. Miami kind of got back into it a few times, but every time they would get kind of close, right? They'd miss a few shots. They missed a lot of bunnies right around the basket, and then
Yeah.
Atlanta would take advantage. They punished them on the offensive rebounds. They had like 20 second chance points. It was really rough. I do want to give credit to Atlanta, just considering there was a lot of talk about them maybe making some major changes in the offseason, that the front office had been given the green light to make a lot of things change, including maybe moving Trae Young.
Right.
We had talked about that kind of earlier in the year, where there was a report from Chris Haynes saying that he might be the next guy to ask out. Then Kevin O'Connor of The Ringer, he mentioned that, again, he said that the Atlanta front office had been given the green light by the ownership to do whatever is necessary. But, a big win for them, so they're going to take on the Celtics. But,
Yep.
With Miami, I don't know. The way they looked, I don't even know if they're necessarily going to beat Chicago. They might just end up falling out altogether. It was just a ugly performance. It was weird because for most of the year, I was kind of trying to toe the line between whether or not I just thought Miami was just saving it for the playoffs, or maybe they were just kind of a bad team. I
Right.
think they might be more of just a bad team. They were, compared to Atlanta, they were really small, couldn't really shoot, couldn't really rebound, couldn't even really make a lot of shots around the basket
Yeah.
either. It was just there were like pretty much no bright spots for them other than Kyle Lowry.
Yeah, it was hard to watch, and I was one who was pretty high on the Heat. But now I'm not high on them at all. They are very bad. Like you said, they are a bad team. I think that's what we can take away from that game, unfortunately. And like you said, we'll get into it in a little bit, but we're gonna preview some of the upcoming playing games as well. But yeah, I think Miami is gone. I,
Yeah,
I I don't think you can really bounce back from a sluggish and slow game like that where you're just missing everything and you're just letting
yeah.
them have anything.
And then like Atlanta's bench, I mean, they outplayed Miami's bench. I mean,
Yeah,
Kyle Lowry is pretty much the only guy off the bench that really did anything.
exactly.
But then for Atlanta, you had Sadiq Bey, with 17, right? Onyeka Okongwu with 12
Yeah,
rebounds, or
huge shout
excuse
out to
me, 12
him.
points, 4 rebounds.
Yeah.
Jalen Johnson, right, from Duke, I believe, right? He had 10.7 rebounds.
Yes.
Bogdanovich, right?
Yes.
Yeah, 14 points. So
Yes.
I mean, just I don't know, just a bunch of pretty solid performances from a lot of guys for Atlanta. Trey Young had a pretty solid game. Didn't shoot well from three, but still got wherever he wanted.
Right.
And did a really good job controlling the offense for Atlanta. So, I just wanted to give a shout out to Atlanta because even though I didn't pick them to win, I at least gave them a chance,
Yeah.
and they definitely proved us wrong.
Yeah, we left the door open for them, so we're not too mad at it, but it is what it is. We don't like being wrong. Simple as that.
Yeah.
Moving on to Minnesota versus the Lakers.
Mm.
Lakers won this one 108-10 or yeah, 108-102. This was a really hilarious game in my opinion. We
Yeah.
watched it together.
Yep.
And we had a bunch of laughs in our private Discord, but it was just funny. Lots of mistakes, lots of errors, but also some really like interesting moments too. As a Lakers fan, I'm sure you can speak to it. So go
Yeah.
ahead.
I mean, you mentioned that the Atlanta Miami game was the ugliest one. I
Mhm.
think this was honestly probably the ugliest
I
one.
don't
Just
know. This one was the funniest one to me
I
though.
mean, it was highly entertaining, but it was
Yeah.
also just like bad at a lot of points. I
Yeah.
mean,
You're right.
Minnesota pretty much was in control for a good chunk of the game. The Lakers would sometimes kind of get it close, and then Minnesota just kept on knocking down a lot of big shots. I mean, I
Right.
I want again similar to Atlanta, I want to give credit to Minnesota, even though they didn't win. I think in a situation where nobody picked Minnesota to win, given everything that had happened to them with Gobert, Kyle Anderson, and then McDaniels, right, punching the wall,
Yeah.
breaking his hand, right, just with all those odds against them. And like I said, I don't think anybody really thought Minnesota was going to win. They played really well, and they
Yeah.
honestly could have honestly won this game, but um, you got a much better performance from the Lakers in the second half, especially
Yes.
on the defensive end, right? I think through the fourth quarter and overtime, I think Minnesota only scored I think from the 6 minute mark to the end of the fourth into overtime, I think they scored 7 points. I think that was it.
Right.
Because yeah, exactly. I mean, it was just Mike Conley, Carl Anthony Towns, they played great for most of the game. Towns got into foul trouble right towards the end, so it was kind of hard for him to do a whole lot. Kyle
Right.
Anderson was great. Torian Prince made a lot of big shots. Even a couple of their guards off the bench, Alexander Walker, Jalen Noel, they played pretty well. Just you got a really bad performance from Anthony Edwards, and that was kind of one of the differences in this game was that
Yeah.
if he had even just the average performance, he was like 3 for 17, 0 of 9 from three. Lakers actually did a really good job of guarding him. If he had, like I said, just even like a just mediocre performance, they probably would have won this game.
Yeah. For sure.
Like you said, a lot of funny moments. Going back to the Lakers side, LeBron had 30 points, 10 rebounds, 6 assists, but he also had some stretches in the game that were just really weird.
Yeah.
Where I mean, he had some defensive lapses early on in the game, especially a lot of really just bizarre turnovers late in the game. Right, I think he had a play where he was posted up um, around the free throw area, right, threw it back out, and then it just ends up being Minnesota just
Yeah. It was
intercepting
bad.
it right away.
Yeah.
Another play, I think, where he threw it away on the inbounds. Just a lot of, like I said, a lot, like you and I said, just a lot of sloppy play.
Yeah. It was really sloppy.
Yeah, but AD also 24 points, 15 rebounds. Not a super dominant game offensively, although he showed up in big moments. But defensively, I thought he was really good.
Yeah. He made his
Changing a
presence
lot of
known.
shots. Yeah, even when he wasn't blocking shots, he made a big impact in terms of altering shots. Right,
Right.
getting steals, getting rebounds. He had 9 offensive rebounds. His only real mistake defensively was at the end of the fourth, right? We know Dennis Schroeder hits that big three with a second left. We thought the game was probably over, and then AD fouls Mike Conley with a tenth of a second left, and of course you knew Mike Conley was going to make all three free throws. But yeah, big performance from a couple of the guys off the Lakers bench,
Yeah,
Schroeder, Rui Hachimura. But
big
you
time.
got yeah, but a couple of the guards, Reeves was okay. He had some stretches where he was all right, but not one of his best performances. But D'Angelo Russell was really bad. I
Oh
mean,
boy.
he struggled. He had 2 points, 1 of 9 from the field, 0 of 4 from three, had 8 assists.
Yeah,
But also like um just the depth that he struggled. It was so bad. I almost didn't even realize at times that he was out there. But then when I look at the minutes played, he really wasn't out there for much of the second half. He only played 24 minutes.
yeah,
Dennis Schroeder closed most of the game. Um, but I don't know. This was definitely a very strange game. Obviously, as we mentioned with the Hawks taking on the Celtics, right? The Lakers are going to take on the Grizzlies. And Minnesota will have to face Oklahoma City for that final play-in spot. But
yeah.
yeah, just strange game. Like I said, I thought it was an ugly game.
It was.
But
Looking
it was
back
still
on it, it was rough.
yeah, but it was still entertaining, back and forth, right? We didn't know who was going to win as it got closer and closer, but you know, um, big win for the Lakers, obviously. And again, like I said, pretty gutsy performance by Minnesota. Just obviously, if you're a Minnesota fan, I'm sure you're disappointed that it didn't end up in a win. But
Yeah,
I think there's a lot of positives to take away from Minnesota. There, it's just you just gotta hope maybe you can get a good performance from Gobert if he comes back healthy. I don't know if he's going to play, right? Reports say he might not play because he has back spasms, but we'll have
right.
to see.
And for me, I'm gonna keep it brief, and I'm only gonna really make one statement. If Ant Edwards played like how he normally plays, I think the Lakers would have lost this game. Simple as
Yeah,
that.
that was what I mentioned
Yeah,
earlier. I
yeah,
just felt like just 3 for 17, just not
yeah.
good enough.
And that's not the Ant that we're accustomed to. So I don't know what was going on there, but it's unfortunate that he couldn't step up to the plate in the big moment. And like I said, we're trying to keep those games brief because we did live stream the reactions and our recap. So, we kind of already talked about this on a deeper level. So go check that out. But, to move on to day two of the play-in, this one hurt me the most because I missed on all my picks on this one. But, we had Chicago versus Toronto, and Chicago came away with the win 109-105. Special shout out to the defensive player of the game, DeMar DeRozan's daughter. Definitely helped the Bulls win that one. But yeah, it was a interesting game, I thought. And I had picked the Raptors to win this one, so unfortunately they lost. And Siakam, he had 32 points. Like I said, I thought he was going to explode. I had a feeling, but the problem is with his explosion, he also choked the game. He missed some free throws that could have potentially tied the game up, and we probably would have been looking at overtime. Shout out to Fred VanVleet. I also said he would explode as well. He had 26 points, 8 assists, and 12 rebounds. So that's pretty special for him, especially for a guy who's had a lower, season, like a season that's not been too hot. But yeah, I don't know. With this Toronto team, this honestly surprised me. I know a lot of people were split on this game, but Toronto was up and they just blew it. And, the missed free throws, I think, was the biggest thing because they shot around 50% from
Yeah, they
the
missed
free
about
throw?
20 free throws.
Yeah, that's too many. You can't miss that many, especially going into the playoffs. And I'm surprised that even happened. But yeah, definitely shout out the Bulls though. They Zach LaVine had 39 points. Great player. And that was basically what you said. You said Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan were probably going to explode, and that was going to push them over the edge. So, you were definitely right about that. But I don't know. What were your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, going into it, I did pick Chicago to win. I liked the fact that Chicago over, the last month and a half or so of games had been one of the better defensive teams in the league. Obviously, you got Alex Caruso, right, who's been great. He was really good defensively in this game, right?
Yeah,
3 steals, 3 blocks, especially like in the fourth quarter. He kind of helped change the game, forcing the Raptors into a lot of turnovers and
for
just
sure.
tough shots in general. Beverly, right? Obviously he can run hot or cold, right? Obviously, he is valuable to them defensively, but For me, that was kind of the main difference. Was just I just believed in the Bulls' ability to defend. It didn't look like that in the first half. I believe they were down by 19
Yes.
at halftime, right? So I mean, it looked like that the Raptors were just gonna kind of run away with it, like you mentioned. Siakam and Van Vliet had pretty solid games. But in the second half, right, the Bulls just kept chipping away, just kept getting stops. Zach
Yeah.
Levine, like you mentioned, at 39, DeRozan at 23. Both of those guys made big shots towards the end of the game. Um, but yeah, the biggest story obviously was the missed free throws because I mean, like we mentioned, 18 of 36 from the line in a game where you lost by 4, right? So you don't again, kind of like what we mentioned about Edwards, right? Even if you just shoot 70% from the line, right? I mean, so let's say you make just 4 or 5 more free throws, right? 22 for 36. That's still not good, but I mean, that would have been enough to pretty much kind of, seal the game for you.
Yeah.
So it's just for me personally, I just didn't feel great about Toronto, just given the stories that we had heard, the issues going on with the players and Nick Nurse. It just felt like that this team might be okay with kind of just calling it quits. But again, they played really well for most of the game. They just couldn't get it done at the end. So they played hard. Um, but just in general, just just a bizarre performance. But at the same time with Toronto, you look at them, unlike the Bulls, I feel like the Bulls have a little more to play for because the Raptors, regardless of what happens, I believe they'll keep their draft pick, right? So they're going to get a
Yes.
lottery pick since they're out of the playoffs. But the Bulls, right, their pick goes to Orlando unless I think it lands in the top 4, right? And because they have a chance to make the playoffs, they're not going to be in the top 4. So, I mean, that was one of the other differences. But just in general, yeah, I think it's just for me with the Bulls, with the defense combined with the offensive output you get from Vucevic, DeRozan, and Levine. I just felt like that was probably a better combination to win than the Raptors. Just I
Okay.
don't know because the Raptors have been okay, right? And I guess record wise they had one more win than the Bulls, but still, this one was kind of a tough prediction. But I just leaned into Chicago because it just felt like they had been playing better as of late.
Yeah. It was a rough decision to make, but the main reason I picked Toronto was because of experience, and I just thought,
Yeah,
potential coaching could also come into play, but I mean, I was completely wrong. I mean, this team looked like they didn't know how to close a game, because like, they led in the first quarter 28-23. Then they led in the second quarter with 30, the outscoring them
yeah,
30-24. And then, in the second half, like you said, it was just a collapse. And then to the point where in the fourth, you get outscored 37-24. That's unacceptable in the playoffs. So, seems like
yeah,
the Raptors
not,
have a lot of growing pains. I don't even know if you can even call it that. It might
yeah.
just be like they're just not as good as, we thought. But, yeah, that was an interesting game. I was kind of disappointed on that one, like I said, because they blew the lead. I was pretty confident in my pick, but definitely wrong on that one.
They got a lot of work to do in the offseason.
Yeah, what do you think is
Obviously,
next?
yeah, I mean, obviously, we had heard lots of rumors about Nick Nurse, right? There had been reports that some of these teams looking for coaches, right? He might be a name if he's out on the market. Just given that we have heard so much about that, it feels like he's probably on his way out. I think he's a good coach, so I think he'll get another opportunity to coach somewhere else. It's just a matter of who's available and where he wants to go.
Right. I get
With
that.
Toronto, yeah, and then we also heard Siakam mention he wants to be a Raptor. Obviously, going into the trade deadline, there was a lot of talk about maybe the Raptors moving on from some guys, right? Van Vliet was a name that was mentioned. Gary Trent Jr. was a name that was mentioned, but they ended up being a semi-buyer at the deadline since they traded for Jakob Poeltl. So they got a solid center,
Yeah.
to mesh with that core. But I just don't really know what they do because again, they were a pretty good team last year. And you thought that they might get a little better, right? But I don't think the ceiling was a championship team. But that they definitely took a step back in a big way this year, right? Going from I think they were the 5th seed last year in the
Yeah.
Eastern Conference to now, being out of the play-in. So that's pretty tough to swallow if you're Toronto this season. I don't really know where you go from there. Maybe they make some big moves, or maybe they just run it back. I'm not sure. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just I don't know.
Yeah. Earlier in the season, I know, I think we both said don't blow it up. But now I'm still leaning towards don't blow it up. Like you said, run it back. That's what I think you need to do because, like you said, their options are pretty limited in my opinion. But because I don't know what kind of like value these guys are gonna have at the end of the season. You know,
Van Vliet,
um,
I think, will be a free agent, right?
right,
So, you know, obviously there have been rumors about him looking for a lot of money, but
right,
I don't think there's that many teams with a ton of cap space. I think Orlando was a team that was mentioned as as a team of interest, but they also have a lot of other guards, and I just
yeah,
don't know.
that
It's
doesn't
just
fit. That wouldn't mesh
yeah,
well.
we're just gonna have to yeah, we're just gonna have to see how this plays out in the offseason. I think I can't really predict what Toronto is gonna do because
Yeah,
it's just every time you think they're gonna do something, then they end up doing something else.
yeah, I don't think they're gonna blow it up though. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, to move on to the last game that has occurred as of this recording, and that was OKC versus New Orleans.
Yep.
This was a wild game. I can't even lie. In the beginning, it was really slow. It was like, okay, well, this is kind of boring. But OKC, they fought hard, and we have to give them a bunch of credit. We both picked New Orleans for this one, unfortunately, and we watched it together. Lots of funny moments. And also moments where like, what the heck is going on? Or what are you doing? Why is this guy doing this? Etc. But starting with the Thunder, we got to shout out the winners first. Um,
Yep.
Dort, he had 27. Hats off to him for that. He's more of a defensive guy, but he had 27 points, which is
He played
great.
great defense this season
Yes,
too.
yeah.
So
There was a literally a possession where Brandon Ingram just chucked up a three. Not chucked up. I'm not gonna say chucked up because that took skill. He tried to he shot the three, but Dort defended it, I think, the best you could without fouling. He didn't touch him or anything. He just went straight up vertical. But, that was a crazy shot by Ingram. But anyways, yeah, Lou Dort had 27 points, which is really good, especially for a defensive guy. But, he did play stellar defense as well. Jalen Williams, which is the center, he had 8, 8, and 8, so 8 points, 8 assists, 8 rebounds, solid. Not too good from the 3 point line, but he did have an impact.
made the big shots.
Yeah, exactly. So then you have Josh Giddey, who may be the unsung hero of this game, but we'll get into that in a little bit. But 31 points, 10 assists, and 9 rebounds. Um, Great performance from him. Things got a little chippy with him and I think it was Richardson, but you know they didn't let that phase them at all. And then you have Shea. This guy is on another level at this point. 32 points, 3 assists, 5 rebounds. I mean, he's just a tough shot maker, shot creator, scorer, everything. And like, the thing that I like about his game is he doesn't do it from, you know, jacking up threes. He does it from all over the floor. Like there's times where it's like you probably have never seen a guy score from that area consistently, but he does it. Um, and then the bench guys, they did their thing as well. But what did you think of the Thunder on this one? Did they shock you, shock the world, or what were your
Yeah, I
thoughts?
mean, I think a lot of people had picked New Orleans to win, given the fact that even though they don't have much, right, but they had playoff experience, right? They went to the postseason last year.
Yes.
Oklahoma City, you didn't necessarily know what you were getting because it does feel kind of like kind of like a scrappy college team, right? Not a ton of guys that a lot of people know
Right.
necessarily, but a lot of young, pretty athletic, talented guys. They don't even have a center really when you think about it, right?
No.
Jalen Williams, the forward, is basically their center. Josh Giddey's their tallest player out there, other than say Dario Saric.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so it's
They
such
play
a
small
strange
ball.
team, right?
Well, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, a team with not a ton of rim protection,
Yeah.
not a ton of rebounding, but somehow they've been able to really just outperform any and all expectations over the course of this season, right? I think most people expected them to be one of the bottom feeders of the league, but they
Yeah.
have a chance potentially, and we're going to talk about it after this game, right? But they have a chance to potentially just make the playoffs as an eighth seed, right? Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, as you mentioned, played like a superstar. Josh Giddey, like you mentioned, also had a huge performance, right? Almost had a triple double in,
Yeah.
a big uh, playoff style game like this, right? Even
Mm-hmm.
knocked down some threes, which is
Yes.
important for him. He's not necessarily the greatest 3-point shooter. Um, I mean, you got a little bit from the bench, not a whole lot, right?
Yeah.
But just enough to kind of carry you over the top.
Exactly.
Um, so I was really impressed by Oklahoma City's performance. It was weird because again, even though they don't have a ton of experience in these type of moments, it felt like they were the team with more experience because when you looked at how New Orleans played down the stretch, just a lot of really just bad shots, right? CJ McCollum had a really poor game. Just wanted to mention, he said that he had been playing through a shoulder injury and a knee
Okay,
injury.
that makes
So,
sense.
in fairness to him, Valanciunas was good, right? And you would think that they would have tried to exploit him more, given that OKC doesn't have any other bigs, or legit bigs necessarily. But again, 16 points, 18 rebounds, felt like you could have used him more. Herb Jones, right? Solid game. Ingram, solid game. Trey Murphy, the third, right? Really solid game, but
Yeah,
not much help from your bench, right? Larry Nance Jr. was kind of a late scratch. I think they could have really used him. Josh Richardson, right? Was okay, right? But he had that blunder late in the game, right, where he, as you mentioned, had that flagrant foul, right, hitting Josh Giddey in the crown jewels, right? So that
yeah,
wasn't necessarily, that was a pretty
yeah,
bad decision, especially in the fourth quarter of a game.
for sure.
Um, Right, and New Orleans, as you mentioned, right, they had that big shot where Ingram hits the three, right? They have a chance to maybe tie it up, right? And then they just throw it away on the inbounds.
Yeah, and we both
Just
watched that together, and we were like, "What?
yeah,
WTF?" Like,
yeah,
honestly,
exactly. Just yeah, like I said, it just felt weird because you would think that New Orleans would be the team with more composure, but they really wilted down the stretch.
yes,
Maybe they were gassed, and again, they had been playing pretty well down this final stretch of games in the regular season. But in fairness, when you put in a lot of the context, right, they also had a lot of wins against teams that were either kind of shorthanded, um, or just were just
true.
sitting guys, right? But again, you still have to give them credit for winning games. But I still thought that they would have a better performance than this, but just it was weird because they had played pretty good defense the last few weeks, but it did not show up today. I mean,
No,
OKC just lit them up. I mean,
yeah,
and I just wonder now, what do you do with this team? I mean, because we saw earlier in the year, right? I mean, they were the number one seed in the Western Conference in
yes,
January, right? Then Zion goes down, and everything just goes from gold to just pure garbage. I mean,
yeah,
it's just you almost feel bad. I mean, because again, like when they're healthy, they are a really talented team, but we're never able to see them healthy, and I don't really know what you can do about it. I mean, I don't think you have to get into the discussion of trading Zion yet, obviously, because
no,
when he plays, he's just so incredible. But
you can't let
you
go
do
of
kind of wonder.
generational talent like that.
Yeah, I just don't know what you do because again, I mean, their two guys just can never seem to play a stretch of games together.
Yeah,
Um, and it's just unfortunate, right? Because you feel like, if Zion was in this game, I'm sure they probably would have won. But then if he had been healthy for most of the season, they wouldn't even be in this position, right?
exactly.
Um, they had that
Great
pick
point.
swap situation. Yeah, they had that pick swap situation, I think, with the Lakers, but now that's kind of rendered useless, um, right? Because obviously you're not going to take the Lakers pick when their pick is going to be worse than yours. So at this point, I don't know. It was definitely disappointing, but I don't know what you do. I mean, you're paying CJ McCollum a lot of money. And I just don't necessarily know, as a point guard, does he fit? I just don't know what you do with this team. I mean,
Right.
they do have other picks at their disposal, right? They do have some young talent maybe that they can look to make some moves with, but I just don't know. It's just such a bizarre team, and it's just been unfortunate, right? Because they have talent, but they haven't had much to show for it, just because they're either not healthy or they just underperform.
Yeah. The problem with New Orleans is they bank on the health of their team every season. And that's probably what's going to happen for as long as Zion's on the roster, unfortunately. Um, and shout out to the Thunder because they did this on the road. That's crazy.
Yeah,
And I'd mentioned it in the last episode that they are basically a college team. So they stepped up to this moment, and we could be seeing a March Madness Cinderella-esque kind of storyline developing with this. But overall, what are your thoughts on the play-in so far? Have you enjoyed it, or have you
I mean,
kind of been like, eh?
Yeah, I personally have really enjoyed it so far. I thought when it was first announced, I thought it was a really good idea.
Same.
And I think the quality of the games and the competition is really impressive. Especially when you consider during the regular season, you don't normally see these types of performances
Right.
aside from like every once in a while.
For sure.
Um, yeah, personally, I would keep going with this. I think that they're going to possibly make some more changes. Maybe I think what they could potentially do is maybe add some additional playing games,
Okay.
right? So maybe like make them into a little mini series, right?
Like a 3-game series or
You know,
something like that.
yeah, exactly, something
Okay.
like that. Obviously, you can make the case that maybe it's not fair, But at the same time, right, like the 9, 10 seeds, before the play-in had no chance to make the playoffs because you
Very
have to
true.
be in the top 8 in order to get in. But now you could be the 10th seed, and have a chance to get in.
Yeah.
So I mean, and that's what Oklahoma City, I think, it was basically doing right now, right? They were the 10th seed, and if they beat Minnesota in this next game, they could get in.
Yeah.
So for me personally, I like it a lot. Um, I don't necessarily like the 7th seed being involved.
Okay.
Um, and it's
I
not
get
even
that.
because I'm a Lakers fan. I just think in general, I feel like there's a difference between the 7th and 8th seed normally, and
Big
I just
one.
feel like 8, 9, and 10 should duke it out. I think the first year of the play-in, that's what they did, if I'm not mistaken. They
Yes.
had 8, 9, and 10.
Yeah.
7 wasn't really involved. I personally like that better because
Me
I
too.
I just don't like the idea of the 7th seed. I think when you're 7, you're pretty much in the playoffs,
It's
right?
a high value
Because
team.
8 seed, yeah, exactly. 8 seed is the lowest spot, right? So obviously I can understand that, but I don't know. Like that's pretty much the only real change I would make. I don't think they're going to do that. And
Right.
I mean, again, I guess you can't really blame them because it's been working. Because every year there always ends up being players or teams that maybe you wouldn't necessarily expect to be in a play-in
Yeah.
situation, right? Like say the Lakers, or the Warriors a couple seasons ago,
Right.
right? Just yeah, exactly. Or even Oklahoma City, right? Just
For sure.
teams where you just didn't expect them to be in the play-in. They have talented guys, and all of a sudden they just have big games. I do think that there should be some more discussion about how can we have more of this in the regular season.
Yes.
Um,
Good point.
because I think, yeah, because I just think over the course of the regular season, we just don't really have a lot of great matchups, right? You'll have games, right, where they'll advertise them on TV. But then as it ends up, nobody ends up playing, right? Maybe due to load management, just whatever. So if we can figure out a way to get this into the regular season, then I think you're pretty much set. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to do it. Obviously, a lot of people, in myself included, think that they should lower the amount of regular season games. I
Yeah.
don't think
I
they're ever
think
going
so.
to do that. Yeah. Well, I think with the mid-season tournament, I think they're going to do it by like a few games, but I mean, like we're talking about like 3, 4 games at
Yeah.
most, right?
I
But
get
I
you.
think personally, it should probably be closer to like 70
Okay. Yeah.
to 70 to 60, something like that.
Yeah.
But I don't think they're going to do that. There's too much money involved. But I
Yeah.
personally enjoyed the plan, and I think it's here to stay because I
Yeah.
mean the quality of these games, even the ugly ones, are still I think miles ahead better than a lot of the regular season games because these are basically playoff games,
Exactly.
right? And we know come playoff time, it's always incredibly different, right? It's officiated differently. Right. You saw in some of these games they let they kind of just let the players just play through a lot of contact.
Yeah.
Um, right. And just in general, right, you can see some players, right, in a playoff environment don't necessarily look the same as they do in the regular season.
Yes.
So personally, I think it's awesome.
Yeah. I agree with you 100%. And I really thoroughly have enjoyed the playing so far. And, it's going to continue. And that's what we're about to talk about right now. So it's prediction time. Ding, ding, ding. The first episode, the first game we've got is going to be Bulls Heat. Now, I think this is going to be an interesting one because I think the Heat are done. So off rip, I'm picking Bulls. Um. So yeah, I don't know. What do you
Yeah.
think of this?
But yeah, so it is kind of funny how we got here, right? Because we thought that the Heat were going to beat the Atlanta Hawks
Yeah.
for that 7th spot, but they ended up turning in a really poor performance. And it just kind of you just kind of wonder, right? Do they have it in them to, beat the Bulls, or are they just probably just going to stink up the joint? I
Right.
don't know, because again, you had a couple of things, go against them, right? Again, Jimmy Butler and Bam were both awful at the same time, right? Is that going to happen again? I mean, maybe. I mean, because again, the Heat haven't been that great this year.
Yeah.
And again, you need performances out of some of the other guys, but the Bulls are also a much better defensive team than Atlanta. Now, they don't necessarily have the same size at every position,
Right.
right? They have Vucevic right at center. They have Drummond as a backup center, but he doesn't play a ton. Obviously they have Levine and DeRozan, right? Then you
Mm-hmm.
got Caruso, right, who basically and Beverly in the starting lineup with those two guys, right? DeRozan basically acts as like the power forward in a way.
Yeah. Literally.
Um, so I don't know, size wise, it's the Heat are still smaller, right? Because again, Bam's basically your biggest player and really
Yes.
your only real center that can actually play regular minutes, right? Because Love didn't really match up well with the Hawks. I don't
No.
think he necessarily matches up with Chicago. Right, Cody Zeller, right, kind of a similar thing. I don't know. I mean, this is kind of a tough one because again, I didn't expect the Heat to be in this position, but with the way they played, I almost feel like I kind of have to go with Chicago. But then you
Yeah,
factor in their really poor first half performance against Toronto. I don't know, but the Heat can't score. The Bulls can defend really well, so I feel like it. You almost feel like the Bulls are probably going to win and the Heat are going to go home.
yeah,
I just, yeah, I just kind of wonder if the Heat do go home, is this a team that potentially could be, blown up maybe? Just because you just think about it, right? They were a Jimmy Butler shot away from going to the finals last year, right? They went to the
literally.
finals in the bubble. So they had, you know, really good runs, but then you also factor in the year after the bubble, right? They got eliminated in the first round by the Heat, right? They pretty much got embarrassed in that series, right?
Yeah,
And now they're getting embarrassed in the play-in, and they could possibly fall out. So I just wonder, right, with Jimmy Butler, obviously he's getting older. He's still really good,
for sure.
but you don't have a whole lot of other great guys in that supporting cast, right? Hero's fine, but Lowry's old, right? And clearly his signing didn't really work out. Um, Max Strus is okay, right? But again, I don't necessarily know how good he's going to be as a starter, right?
Right.
Duncan Robinson's pretty much out of
He's
the
fallen.
rotation,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, exactly. He fell off, so and you have to worry about his contract going forward. Um, so I don't know. I feel like that's a team that could possibly, bless you. That could
Thanks.
possibly be a team, where people just kind of just move a lot of the guys off that team. I just don't know because I mean, there's a lot kind of on the line for them, but at the same time, I don't know how much better they're really going to be because again,
Yeah.
you have a number of guys that are older. Um, they're not really going to be any better. They don't have a lot of super promising young players. So I mean, if they lose in the play-in to the Bulls, and I feel like they will, I think this team might just kind of just be done. I
Yeah.
mean, I could be wrong. Maybe that's an overreaction, and maybe they shut me up and they end up winning tomorrow. But
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's
I just
prone to
don't think it.
happen.
Yeah.
Trust me.
Yeah, because in a one game scenario, anything can happen. But I don't know. It just feels like this team is done, which, I don't know if I don't know if I felt that way a few months ago, but I feel like it now.
Yeah. And for me, I think the reason I'm picking the Bulls is definitely momentum. Coming off a win, I think that gives you a severe or extreme morale boost. So I think that's what's probably going to push them over the edge. And like you said, the Heat haven't looked good. And not to mention they were at home and their crowd was not in it at all. So,
And they're gonna, I think, be at home again.
yes.
Um,
So
so
you got to keep an eye out on that too, because if the crowd isn't in it, then the team isn't in it either. That's just how sports go. So be on the lookout for that. Now next one, OKC versus Minnesota Timberwolves.
no boy.
This one, it hurts my heart to say, but I have to pick the Wolves. Um, and I know everyone's like, "What are you talking about? Wolves just lost, and OKC just won." Well, the thing with the Timberwolves for me is they're my dark horse, so I'm kind of being forced to pick this team, but I think they do have a solid chance because Ant Edwards can redeem himself. If he redeems himself alongside Cat's, Karl Anthony Towns' solid play, or if he has a solid game, I think they can easily win this game. They just have to, be able to defend, and I'm not sure if they'll be able to do that. I think this is going to be a defensive game on both sides because these are really good offenses in my opinion. So, but OKC they're liable to go off, and we saw it. So, what do you think about this one?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like kind of like you mentioned with the Bulls. I mean, I know the Wolves lost, but it did feel like that they really did play with some heart out there.
Exactly.
We'll see if Gobert comes back. I don't know if he does. Even if he doesn't play, I do feel like Minnesota still has a really good chance to win. I mean, you still have two of your best players, right, in Ant and Towns, right? So you expect a better performance from Edwards, hopefully, right? If you don't get that right, then they're toast. But
Yes.
um, just in regards to the athleticism and the size, I think, you don't have to worry about a LeBron and AD type player against Oklahoma City. As good as, obviously Shea's awesome, right?
He's
But,
great. Yeah.
he's a completely different player than those guys, since he's a guard.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't know. I feel like, obviously they're not, without McDaniels, right? He's a big part of what they do defensively, Minnesota, but
Yeah.
I still think Minnesota has a really good chance to win this game. Just again, right? You have Towns, you have Edwards, you have Mike Conley, right? You have I think a decent coach in Chris Finch, right? I think his game plan against the Lakers, again, even though they didn't win, I thought it was a really good game plan.
Yeah.
And I think, given what he had to work with, it's a tough roster. And I think,
For sure.
he's trying to do what he can with it. It just kind of depends, right? Because then at the same time, right, Minnesota shot the ball pretty well for most of the game against the Lakers, but
Right.
not so much in the second half. So you do kind of wonder if fatigue starts to play a factor, right? Because again, it was an overtime game. It will be at home, right, in Minnesota. So obviously the home crowd, unlike the Laker game, right, that should be a factor, right? Minnesota's fans tend to do a really good job of hyping up the team.
Yeah.
So I don't know. This one is kind of a tough one, but I feel like Minnesota will probably do a better job defensively than New Orleans will. But at the same time, it's really tough. It just kind of depends. Does the shot fall for Minnesota? If it does, I mean, I think they got a really good chance because we talk about it, and I know a lot of people say it's a cliche where it's a make or miss league, but it really is.
It
And
is.
in a one game environment, I mean, playing games are kind of the literal definition of that, right? I mean, if you go through a long stretch where you can't knock down a shot, I mean, you might be done.
Yeah.
So, even though I think Oklahoma City has a really good chance to win, and it wouldn't necessarily surprise me if they win, I think Minnesota should win this game, even though they are shorthanded. McDaniels obviously isn't coming back.
Right.
I just feel like, if you can get a good performance from Towns and Edwards, you got a chance. But Towns is gonna have to stay out of foul trouble. That's the main concern there, right? Because he
Yeah.
just has not been able to do it. And Shea obviously can get to the line as good as anybody. So that's kind of where I'm concerned. If Gobert plays, right, obviously that'll help them when when Towns is off the floor, so that way they can still have size. But I just don't know what what his situation is. But I'm gonna go with Minnesota, but
Okay.
I'm not feeling great about it.
Okay. Well, at least we're on the same page. I think, yeah, I think that's a solid pick. I think it's, honestly, I think it's the safe one because OKC is still a gamble because, they look at their seeding position. So, but I think you hit on all the points there, OKC, they're young, they are inexperienced, but they do have a chance to really pop off and, potentially get into the playoffs through this game, you know. Um,
But
what's
yeah,
up?
just to and also just throw this out there, because I had picked New Orleans to beat Oklahoma City. I still would have picked Minnesota to beat New Orleans anyway.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
even though New Orleans, you would feel like is better than Oklahoma City, but regardless, I thought Minnesota was gonna win
Yeah.
either matchup.
Yeah, I think they'll win. Like you said, I think Cat's too much of a force down there for them. But like you said, that foul trouble, that's going to be a main factor. Um,
Yeah, because he almost fouled out against the Lakers.
yeah,
Obviously, first big thing of news, right? So, according to Shams Charania, Andrew Wiggins, he's reportedly going to be available to play for Game One. He's going to come off the bench, right? And he's probably going to play. They mentioned 20 to 25 minutes,
it's a good
right?
chunk.
I'm assuming if he's coming off the bench, he's probably going to be in the closing lineup. Obviously, I don't know what type of physical shape he's in, but if you're somebody who thinks that Golden State is still going to come out of the West, and I feel like I'm kind of there. I mean, just spoiler alert. I think they're going to come out of the West.
Okay.
This is what you want to see, right? Wiggins has been out for a while. They've missed him. On the wings, he was their second best player last year, right? Helping out on the glass, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially when they go small. Right, being versatile at that wing position, right? Being able to defend, guys like say Jason Tatum,
Yeah.
um, guys like that. Also offensively, obviously, he's a pretty solid scorer, right? And he's now a pretty good 3-point shooter.
Yes.
So I mean, getting him back, I think, is huge. I think they've quietly been pretty good as of late. Obviously, they've had some games against mediocre teams, but still, right? They closed the season out really well, and I think they got a pretty favorable matchup against the Kings. So I think this is great for them. And again, if you're somebody who thinks that they're going to come out of the West, such as myself, I think this is pretty big news.
Yeah. This is really big news. And it's right on time because he is arguably their, maybe second or third best offensive player, but he's definitely their best, on ball defender. So, and that's what defense wins championships. So, if he's liable to shut people down in the West, oh man, yeah, the Warriors could easily come out of the West for sure. So, but, this is great news for Warriors fans and people who are, banking on the Warriors to come out of the West.
Just in general, right? Because you don't want to see a guy,
Exactly.
be in a situation where he's not able to come back and play. Obviously, he
Right.
had, a personal issue going on. So you hope that's doing better.
Yeah.
So it's good to see him back out there.
Yeah, it's great.
Um, And then in the next news, so Damian Lillard, right? Obviously, Portland has been out of contention for a while, right? So he basically made a statement about if Blazers can't contend, I have a decision to make about my future. Um, he mentioned that to Stephen A. Smith on an interview on TV, right?
Yes.
So I don't know. I mean, I feel like I've heard guys like him and Bradley Beal say this every year, and it just doesn't happen.
Yep.
I mean, again, I know he's older, but I don't know. I we've talked about it before with Lillard, right? Where it would be awesome if he was on a team that had a better chance to win, but I just don't know at this point. I mean, I feel like he may be a lifer, but I don't know because again, with Portland's situation, obviously they're gonna have a lottery pick. Um, maybe they luck up and get a top 5 pick. I don't know, but at this point, I don't know. I feel like Portland should move on from Lillard, but I just don't know if they actually are going to because we
Yeah.
hear this every year. I think, and then nothing ends up happening.
Yeah. Dame, we love you, and I'm speaking for myself here, but this is getting a little dramatic for me. Like you said, we've heard this before. It's deja vu. And it's really akin to Aaron Rodgers. I don't really want to talk about football too much, but it's akin to Aaron Rodgers, where you hear the same thing every offseason, but you're not going to believe it till you see it. So that's where I stand on it. It could just be chatter. It could just be him, coping. I don't know, but it's not a good look in my opinion because you can't say all this stuff and then repeatedly go back. It's got to be either or for me. And I love Dame, so this isn't me trying to hate on him or anything. I'm just being honest, and that's my opinion on that. But it's getting tiresome for me.
I agree.
Yeah.
And then to wrap it up, so according to Woj, right, we have reports about the Houston Rockets interviewing Frank Vogel.
Hmm.
Well, also, Woj in the Athletic, right, reports about the Rockets interviewing Frank Vogel and Kenny Atkinson,
Okay.
amongst others, such as Suns assistant Kevin Young. Obviously, right, we know Steven Silas was fired or let go, excuse me,
Yes.
from Houston, right? So of those 3 names, I know there's going to be others. Which one do you think is the most appealing? Obviously, none of them may get hired. It might be somebody else, but
Yeah.
just those are some of the names that we know that they've spoken to so far. What do you think of one of those 3
I
guys?
like
I'm
Vogel the
not familiar
most.
with the Phoenix
Yeah,
Bears.
I like Vogel the most, just due to his repertoire or resume. That is, he had a good run with the Pacers, I think. And he also had a really good run with the Lakers as well. Unfortunately, that didn't work out, but he did win the chip. And a lot of people like to say, oh, well, that's all Braun and AD. Yeah, but coaching does play a factor in it. So, I don't want to discredit him at all. But if I'm looking if I'm hiring somebody, I'm going to take the guy with the best resume, the best experience, all that stuff, the most accolades. So I think that's Frank Vogel for me. What about you?
Yeah, I kind of feel like of those 3 guys, I feel like Vogel is probably the best coach of the 3. I know Atkinson has kind of been in situations with other teams like say Brooklyn
Yeah.
right before they got Durant and Kyrie. I know he
Yes.
did he coach them early into their tenure? I think he did. But I know
I
most of
think
his time in
so.
Brooklyn.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
but
know
most
he
of his
was
time
that coach. He was the coach for the D'Lo Brooklyn team, though, for sure.
exactly. Yeah, so I know he's got a pretty solid reputation, in terms of like rebuilding teams.
Yes.
So, maybe he might be the better fit for Houston, whereas Vogel is probably better, with teams that are, that kind of already have a solid infrastructure set in
Right.
place.
Yeah.
I do think Vogel's the best coach, but in terms of like which guy is probably the best in terms of connecting and reaching young players, it
Hmm.
might be Atkinson.
Okay.
Um, but at the same time, I just don't necessarily know how big of a fan I am of any of these hires. They mentioned other names like Udoka, maybe Nick Nurse. I'm just not sure at this point because again, I kind of need to see what Houston does in the offseason with their roster.
Right.
Right, because obviously they're gonna have a lottery pick. Um, and they're gonna have some cap space. So I'm curious to see who maybe goes there. I think they should probably get some veterans in there as well. But I think of those guys, Vogel's probably the most talented coach,
For
but
sure.
Atkinson may be the best for that situation. But we'll have to see where they go.
Yeah, I agree with that. But like I said, I prefer Frank Vogel just because I know he
Mhm.
probably is the least liable to mess it up. But
And he's the best defensive coach out of all of them.
exactly, and that's something that Houston direly needs. So, I
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, as long as they get somebody in there who's qualified, I think that's fine. But of those names that you gave me, yeah, I'm taking Vogel.
Well, all right, that's it for today's episode of Off Ball Takes. Again, we appreciate the support. Again, we're gonna be planning on doing a live stream recapping the games from day one of the NBA playoffs, right? So Saturday after the Warriors Kings game. So don't
Yep.
forget to join us.
Yes, sir.
Obviously we'll put out, alert and a short, right, explaining join the link in the description. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for all the support, and we'll see you Sunday.